All right, so you guys should have used Desmos. Hopefully it was nice and easy that way. I'll kind of show you by hand as I go over them. So when you graph something, wait, and don't you sit on the other side? Anyway, when you graph something in Desmos, does it need to be in slope-intercept form? No. But if you're graphing something without Desmos, it does need to be. So in that first one, top left, is it in slope-intercept form?
No.
Yes, it is. Why is it in slope-intercept form? Because the y is by itself. All right, you might not see the numbers for the slope and y-intercept, but that's like one of those implied rules. Like, what's the y-intercept if it's not written? No. 0. Because y-intercept is what letter in y equals mx plus b? B. So the number that's alone would be the y-intercept, and there's no number written, it's implied to be 0. So do we normally write plus 0? No. All right, and then you use your slope to plot the next point. And that would be the number that's in front of the x. If there's no number in front of the x, then what's your slope? 1. And so this one has like 3 implied rules, right? Slope should be a fraction. It should be rise over run. What's my run if it's a whole number? Good. So always write it in fraction form. If there's no denominator written, it's implied to be 1. Those rules you do need to know. And there's no like super nice grid, but you can still graph it. You go up 1 to the right 1. Up 1 to the right 1. And would this be a solid line or a dashed line?
Yeah.
Dashed. Then how do you know? Because of the symbol. All right, it is greater than, so no line underneath would be a dashed line. And would it be shaded above or below? Above. All right. And that, again, you were supposed to use Desmos for the warm up. If you didn't get this for some reason, maybe you typed it in wrong, but the y greater than 10. All right, so not that. Question? All right, then what's the only difference between these two?
It's greater than
Good, the line that's underneath. So the only way that this graph would be different is the solid line. The line would still be in the same position. Now it's solid. Would anything on the line be a solution? Yes. If it's on a solid line, then it is included in the answer. And it's still shaded above because it's y greater. All right. What about this one? What's my y-intercept? Good. So it looks like my graph doesn't go down to -8 if I count by 1. What should I count by then? 4. I guess you could. You could also count by 2. So I'll count by 4 since that's what was said first. So you count by -4, -8, -12. That way, my y-intercept being -8, it would be plotted here. If I scaled it that way. And then what's my slope? 0, good. Is there even an x in this one? No. When there's no x, what's the slope implied to be? That's 0 times x would have been, so that's why there's technically no rise, but the run is always 1. So no rise, still have a run. So what I end up getting is a horizontal line. So no slope to it, no rise. Would that be solid or dashed? Dashed is correct. Dashed where all the y's are -8. Then that's a straight line. And is it shaded above or below? Below. 1, because we made a key for it. 2, because you should be able to clearly see that in Desmos. And 3, because you're shading everywhere where the y's are smaller or less than -8. Good? All right. Then these ones, if I were graphing them by hand, they would need to be rearranged, right? But luckily, this one has you guys use Desmos, and we have graph stuff like that, right? Hopefully that makes sense. Sorry, it became super tiny. Is it -x + 8? Did I read that right? And then less than or equal to y. All right, so where's my y-intercept? Where does it cross your y-axis? At 8, so put a dot on the 8. So how should we number this graph? Words again. All right, so then 8 would be here. And then what's my slope? -1/1. So this one is in slope intercept form. It's just flip. The y is still alone, so you can still see the slope clearly. And keep in mind, you don't want to go like down 1 to the right one here, because technically, we're going down to the 7 to the right 1. Down to the 6 to the right, to the 2. Now, solid or dashed on this one? Good, and you should be able to see that in Desmos too. Shaded above or below? Above. That's what you see in Desmos. And even though like some people get confused when the y is on the other side, you have to see what is bigger in the relationship, and that would be the y. I'm trying not to draw all over the other. All right, questions on that one? All right, this one, what's my y-intercept? -200. So we're going, how do you want to scale these? So count by hundred, so this would be -100, -200, dot there. And my slope is 10/1. This, honestly, with the way that we're numbering it, might be a little bit difficult. But if I'm going up 10 to the right one, should be something similar to this. Of course, it depends what we number these at. Sometimes they number them by 1s on the x and 500s on the y. So that is like allowed, and they do that. Going up 10 to the right one might be something like that if we scale it this way. Solid or dashed? Dashed is correct. And shaded above or below? Below. Should be able to see that same thing in Desmos too, correct? All right. Last one I'll put into Desmos because it's not in slope intercept form. What form is that last one in? Good. Anyone know the name for it? Standard form. And this one I'm gonna have to like look for, but what's my y-intercept on this one? Oh. Right, good. So then what's my y-intercept on this one? 20. I got At first, I forgot to put 3. Oh. So that's why. Good catch there. But yeah, type it in exactly how it looks on your paper. It'll do the graphing for you. So then how should I number these on my chart? Tick mark. Okay, I heard 10 first, so I'll count it by 10. Someone else said 20, so that's fine. Just depends, you know, how big your scale is in that problem. So dot where the 20 would be on the y-axis. And I don't really know my slope. I guess I have to look for it or rearrange it. So another thing you could do is just look for a nice point that goes through like a crosshair, like 15, 10, I just found, by clicking on the line and drag. So I'll plot another point where 15, 10 would be. Or if you could figure out the slope and do it that way. So then if I count all of these by 10, 15 would be like here, 10 would be there. And would it be solid or dashed? Right, dash. And then I can do this line. Normally, I suggest at least 3 dots to make your graph, but since we're using Desmos, I'll just do that. And was it shaded above or below? Yes, so then shade it above. Of course, you could always rearrange it and then see for yourself if it's Y bigger than the line or Y less than the line. So that's why Desmos is a great tool. That's why buying your own graphing calculator and using it for the ACT, SAT is a great tool. Those of you that I pulled for the quiz did it end up working? Can you try like again and just move it low, like exit out of it? All right, so then moving on, or let me tell you the goal for today. Today's the 25th. We are doing lesson 23, which is solving problems with inequalities in 2 variables. So we are going to practice writing, interpreting, and graphing solutions to inequalities in 2 variables, like using graphing technology to do that. When given descriptions that represent constraints, and connecting different representations and interpreting them in terms of your puzzle piece will be 23. The 22 was homework, so if you didn't get that done, try to get that done sooner than later. And we are close to the end of our unit. This is a pretty big unit. It will be the biggest unit all year. So we just have one more quiz this unit over lessons 21 through 23. Since we're doing 23 today, the quiz is planned for tomorrow. All right. So be prepared. Look at your practices. That's usually how we base the quizzes. And then, yeah, I just don't think we'll get to unit 2 test this Friday like originally planned. So still don't wait until the very day before to study. Things always come up, like you have practice. You guys are cheating on work, but I have had students that have to work and things like that. You need to be right. It's a 100-point test. The first part. The second part is a 50-point, and they're supposed to be taken in the same hour. So I know it's been a while since we did the unit 1 test, but it's the same structure. You have some on the computer and some on the paper. So you need to finish both in that time. And the study guide has been in, it's been in Schoology. Once we get to our review day, it is going to be officially assigned to you and worth 100 classroom. Because I want you to do it. It looks just like your unit 2 test. So I know I have some kids still wanting to retake, and that's totally fine. I'm not going to take that opportunity away from you. But they still want to retake stuff from unit 1. And it's like, we have this unit 2 test coming up. Don't just look in the past. look at right now and the test you're about to take and do well on it the first time. The questions on anything so far? All right, so then back to the lesson. Now this appears to be the answers. So great. That's not printed on your paper. Now we will be problem solving. So here are two situations. There are two questions about each situation. For each question that you work on, write an inequality to describe the constraint. What are constraints? Kind of like limits, right? Like you can't spend more than $3,000 or things like that. Sorry, I need to adjust this. Okay, that's better. So write an inequality to describe the constraints, specify what each variable represents. Use graphing technology to graph the inequality, sketch the solution region on the coordinate plane, and label the axes. Name one solution to the inequality and explain what it represents in that situation, and then answer the question about the situation. So there is another page though, so we'll just start with the bank accounts that's printed on your paper already. So a customer opens a checking account and savings account at a bank. They will deposit a maximum of $600. Some in the checking account and some in the savings account. They might not deposit all of it and keep some of the money as cash. If the customer deposits $200 into their checking account, what can you say about the money they deposit in their savings account? And then there's the second question. The bank requires a minimum balance of the, sorry, can you help me out there? Good. It does not matter how much money is kept in the checking account. If the customer deposits no money in the checking account, but is able to maintain both accounts without penalties, what can you say about the amount deposited in the savings account? So that is your task within your groups. So if you need to like split it up, if you need to work together on each part, then do that. But I'll give you 5 minutes to start with, and then if you're stuck, I'll give you some hints. All right, so even though some of you may not have bank accounts yet, make sure like if you don't understand the words that you ask. But what are some constraints in this situation? Daniel? Okay, so maximum of 600. We'll talk about that sign in a second. Lauren? Or was that what you were gonna say? Sorry, what'd you say? Oh, okay. Any other constraints at all? Parker? Good. So in the second part, it has a minimum balance of 50 in the savings account. Does not matter how much is kept in the checking account. So use that and any other numbers in the problem to kind of help you make your equation, or in this case, it's an inequality. So if I was showing the maximum of $600 that he has to have, can what's in the checkings and savings combined, can it be bigger than the 600 if that's the maximum? No. Can it be smaller than the 600? So then use the sign that would show that the 600 is bigger in that situation. Could they have exactly $600? So then I'm gonna put the line underneath. All right, I don't memorize that maximum is always less than or equal to or anything like that, because it just depends on what side of 600. Like if I put it on the left side, that would still show that the 600 is bigger, but it's a different sign used. Now, what should we put on the other side of it? What is supposed to be under $600? Like, tell me in words. The amount in both accounts. So some in the checking, some in the savings. Do we know how much they're putting into the checking? Could that vary? So I'm gonna put it as a variable. Maybe the checking account can be X, whatever money is in there. What should we put for the savings account? Good, because that can also vary. So that if you got that your first try, great job. If not, use those strategies to help you when you have to determine it. So in this case, I would graph that because solutions to inequalities, is it just one solution? No, it's like a range of solutions, a lot of possible combinations. So I'm going to graph this. You can use the graphing technology. In fact, that's what like they want you to use today, but I'll just show you the normal way by hand. If I want to graph it, what form does it need to be in? Get the y by itself then, because that's how it is in y equals mx plus b. What would I do to get the y alone? Subtract x, whatever you do on one side. And then I have y alone now. I don't need to flip the sign when I subtract, do I? Okay, so leave it the same. And are these like terms? All right, no, one has an x, the other one doesn't, so just rewrite it. So then what's my y-intercept? 600. Notice this isn't labeled. How should we label it? 400. All right, well, I mean, that's fine. I'm gonna label it, I don't know if I have enough. 50. Yeah, I'm gonna label it by 50 so that I can use like the entire graph stage. It's fine if you labeled it by 100, it just means that your graph is more like condensed down here. But if I label it by 50, so I'll just label like every other one. So it goes 50, 100, 150, 200. Then I can use more of the graph stage. All right, and then I'm gonna plot my y-intercept, which is 600. And then my slope is negative, and it's a negative 1/1. Not sure how I want to label the bottom. Maybe also by 50s. We'll label the bottom. So then that would be 100. All right, because I guess you could have 0 in the, I don't know what we labeled for the y. What did we say y was? We said it's a savings account. And then we said the x was the checking. So we could have 0 in the savings and 600 in the checking and vice versa. So that's why I chose to label it like that. Now, if you graph it down 1/1, and this one, since we labeled it both the same, you can go down 1 to the right one. It's when the increments are opposite that you have to like be careful. But that's also why you have Desmos, because you could find nice points that go through the graph and then go from there. So would this be a solid or a dashed line? Solid. And would it be shaded above or below? Below. 1, because you can see it on your Desmos graph if you type it in.
And 2, because that's what the symbol tells us. Whenever it's y smaller than the line, you shade below. So all of these are possible solutions. Is what is on the line a solution too? Yes, because it's a solid. So then if the customer deposits 200 in her checking account, what can you say about the money deposited in her savings account? So here's 200 for the checking. How much could she have in her savings at most if it's 200 in the checking? At most, she could have 400. Could she decide to have like 200 in both?
Yeah.
Yes, because the rule is that it just has to be less than or equal to the 600. All right, so for what you could say the maximum she can have is 400, but she is also welcome to have below that too. Good. All right, so then the second part says that she now needs to have a minimum of 50 in the savings account. So then that kind of changes it. For the second one, for like the balance in the savings account, I'll use S compared to the 50. Am I allowed to have more than $50 in the savings account? Yes, the savings account can be more than 50. So I just kind of like plug in and check, see if it makes sense. Can it be exactly 50? Yes, that's what it means for a minimum balance. To graph this, let me see. All right, that's what I thought. If the customer deposits no money in the checking account, which is our x-axis, our savings we said was our y. So I can actually replace that S with the y that we said it was. In order to graph that, I'll use the same labeling as before. But this time she's depositing 0 money into her checking account. So think about what the graph would look like. Think about what we've done so far. What's our y-intercept in that one? 50, because it's that single number. What's my slope in that one? 0, because there's no x at all. So I know I'll have a horizontal line. I can also check in Desmos and it'll probably tell me the same thing. So y greater than or equal to 50. All right, so y-intercept is 50, like we said. Solid or dashed line? Solid. And then shaded above or below? Remember, this is what tells you, and also in Desmos too. So shaded above or below? Above. All right, I didn't hear you. All right, but anywhere above where y is 50 is included because all she needs to have is a minimum balance of 50 in her savings account. All right, and that is a real thing that happens. Like I know I'm required to have a minimum of $300 in my savings account or else I get fees. So questions on that? Yes. So that's a good question. It was, why didn't we have an X in there? Was that your question? Yeah. Because in this one, they wanted to know if she had no money in the checking account. So it does not matter how much is kept in the checking account if the customer deposits no money into the checking account. but is able to maintain both accounts without penalty, what can you say about the amount deposited in the city? So based on that, if she doesn't have to have money in the checking, you could put a 0 times X, which is just C0. And it's just asking about the savings for the 50. All right, I was gonna have you guys do the card sort, but I think I'd rather give you time in class to work on your puzzle piece. So the puzzle piece for this lesson is 23. So just leave the card sort nicely on your desk. But the puzzle piece for this is lesson 23. You should have the rest done up to this point, and you should be asking questions if you're ever confused on them. If you're already finished, feel free to work on your study guide. Yes? Yes.